This is 1. This is 5. And this is 10. This explanation is logical, simple and beautiful, but it's wrong explanation. And in this video I will tell you about other ways to explain origin of Latin numerals, and of course about the most probable theory. Hello, I am Maria, and let's go to the theories.
There are several explanations, or better to say theories about origin of these Latin numerals. So we have some ancient discussions of Latin numerals, tally mark theory, pictographic theory, acrophonic theory, and theory by Theodore Mommsen. Some of them are more convincing, some less. Some sounds completely strange, but all of them has their inner logic. And I found that following the author's explanations is quite interesting. Also, I suppose that this video could become more engaging if you imagine yourself to be an ancient person who need to invent a numeral system and science to write these numerals. What it would be like. And forget about your contemporary background and Hindu-Arabic numerals and positional numeral systems, because it is too complicated. Start with some simple, with a stick for example, or with a finger. This is absolutely natural gesture to express the concept of one. And by the way, almost all non-positional numeral systems use this for one. How to evolve your numeral system, how to represent all the subsequent numbers, that is something to think about. And this video is based on the article written by Paul Kaiser, The Origin of Latin Numerals 1 to 1000. I will leave info about this article in the description to the video. Please check it out. But first I want to put here a list of Latin numerals for reference and for your convenience. You definitely notice some strange symbols. This is early form of Latin numerals, and all of these symbols are well attested in Roman inscriptions. Some of them already look like modern form, but for another it takes some time to turn into recognizable numerals. Now we will go to the theories. Ancient. People try to find origins of Latin numerals since antiquity, but they didn't succeed a lot. Ancient discussions of the problem are all from the pens of grammarians. Isidore of Seville says, Vulgaris notas Ennius primus mille et centum invenit. That means that Ennius discovered 1000 and 100, and probably refers to explanation of C and M. And it is supposed that it was explained with acrophonical approach, C centum and M mille, but Isidore doesn't say anything more about this. Mark Valerius Probus has a brief paragraph, De Numeris, which is only a list of Latin numerals, but offers no explanation of the symbols. More elaborate theory was provided by Priscian in 5th century AD. He claims that 1 was taken from Greek. The symbol itself was derived acrophonically from the Homeric form of 1, and this makes sense, as the Greek Attic numeral system was acrophonical. Priscian claims that V is 5, because V is the 5th Latin vowel. Why vowels and not consonants, or simply letters? And why switch to an alphabetical principle? For the X for 10, Priscian has two explanations. First, because it is 10th Greek consonant. Now he switched to Greek alphabet. And second explanation, because X follows V in Latin alphabet. And this dual suggestion shows that he has no idea how X for 10 originated. And this sounds even more strange than the story about V. Then L for 50. Priscian say that L is 50 because nu is the 50 in the Greek alphabetic system, and that itself is true. And nu becomes lambda in some Latin words, and lambda turns into the L. And this is extremely tricky way of explanation. And of course it is simply destroyed by the fact that for 50 Romans use trident sign, and only later it becomes L. Priscian says that C or K is 100 because of the initial letter of centum, 100 in Latin, and here he switched back to acrophonic principle. D is 500 because 500 is next numeral after 100, and D follows C in alphabet. That's unconvincing, but at least consistent with his second suggestions for x. But here is the same problem as with the 50 and L, because symbol for 500 is D crossed with the line, not just D. This is 1000 from Attic Greek system, based on acrophonical principle, with round brackets added to distinguish it from x. Why now return to acrophonic principle, and even to Greek, not Latin acrophonic principle? It seems that only conclusion from Priscian theory that in ancient times neither here nor anyone else knew the origin of Latin numeral system. But anyway, now you have some understanding of how explanations could look like, and how sophisticated they could be. Now let's go to so-called tally mark theories. And if you don't know what is a tally marks, look at this thing. Have you ever used this way to count something? This is tally marks. First tally mark theories appeared in Renaissance era, and here we have three authors. Andrea Alciati says that one line is for 1, and the second numeral has 2 lines, and that has its logic. So for 5 we have V, it is 2 joined lines. For 10 it used X because it is 2V joined, and it also sounds logical. But here Alciati made a mistake, because the connection between 5 and 10 is opposite. First comes 10x, and 5 is the half of x. For 50 he claims that it was a special symbol that looks like this, and it was derived from x by removing a line that was evolved into L later. C for 100 comes from this ancient symbol that was derived from x by adding a bracket, and later becomes just C. But no one else supports such version of C, and there are no any evidence of usage of this symbol. 500 derives from 50 by adding a line, and later it becomes D. This could turns into D, but scarcely into real D sign with the line in the middle. And moreover, there is no evidence for usage of this special symbol. 1000 was made from 100 symbol by adding one more bracket. So we have that Alciati could not cite evidence for 50, has no evidence for C, and ignores the fact that 50 is trident, plus inconsistently deriving 50 from 10 by removing line, but 500 from 50 by addition of line. In general, the theory may be considered as weak, but the idea systematically derived new numeral from existing one by evolving the form is great. And I want to emphasize that unlike Priscian, Alciati tried to be consistent about how numerals derived from each other. Second author is Nicola Tartaglia. He explains only several symbols. One line is for 1. For next numeral that should stand for 10, one line was added, so we have x, 2 crossed lines. From x divided in half we could get a v for 5. And for 50, Tartaglia claims that it was originally just a one diagonal line like this. And this part sounds strange because it is hard to get trident or L from this diagonal line. And also he stops at 50 for some reason. As you can see, this theory is not perfect, but there is an important point here. The number 5 is derived from 10, and this is true statement. Peter Ramos is the first scholar known to have correctly insisted on a systematic nature of the symbols for 1, 10, 100 and 1000, and on the derivative nature of the symbols for 5, 50 and 500. In other words, 5, 50 and 500 are secondary numerals made from primary numerals. So 1, 10, 100 and 1000 are primary numerals. Ramos supposes that this is 1 because it is one-stroke symbol. X is 10 because it's two-stroke symbol. C is 100 because it is three-stroke symbol. But it should be mentioned that according to authors who study Roman scripts, C is two-stroke letter, So this statement is questionable. M is 1000 because of 4 strokes. Ramos proposed that it originates from the 4-stroke form of E or M, while E is a natural successor to C by adding a central stroke. It is not clear why this symbol alone was turned and become M. Also, this statement is not consistent with earlier forms of 1000. Regarding group of secondary numbers, they are derived from primary. V is a half of X. L is a half of C. And D is a half of this symbol. While the idea is sensible and systematic, the regions of L and D cannot be correct. As we know now, for 50 it was first used a trident and not L. And 500 was D with a line in the middle, not just D. It is also questionable why Ramos derived D from this sign and not from E or M, theoretically the earlier forms. But anyway, this is a great progress in evolving the idea of Latin numerals origins. There are several modern theories similar to Ramos, with the primary and secondary groups of numbers, but all of them has insufficient proofs regarding Latin numerals. And at the same time, when applied to Etruscan numerals, they became more logical and convincing. Now look at known Etruscan numerals. 1 stroke, 2 strokes, 3 strokes. And look how nice half of the primary numerals gives us secondary number. We will talk about Etruscan numerals later, and now let's take a look at pictographical theories. Pictographical theories. According to all forms of this theory, 1 stroke represents an extended finger, and V for 5 represents the whole hand, thumbs away from fingers. But in the finger counting system used by Latins, 5 was represented on the left hand by raising together the thumb and all fingers except the middle finger, which was bent into the palm. And this gesture only slightly resembles V. For x10, there are variations of crossed arms and fingers. Different authors choose different options. Also, the gesture for 10 in the finger counting system was none of this, but was made on the left hand with the 3 outstretched fingers together and the index finger bent to touch the outstretched thumb at the thumb's outer joint, not an X. What do pictographical theories say about larger numbers? There are some explanations and they are different, but all tries to make letters from hand gesture. And there are several authors. For example, De Bros makes L on the left hand with the index finger and thumb at right angles. Then D is the index finger on the right hand, curved and joined to the thumb on the same hand. Velikus suggests that C was a hand gesture with all fingers outstretched to form a C as seen from the edge. Barrett used not hands but arms. 50 is because of raised arms. And 100, C, is a teapot handle gesture. Double teapot handle means 1000. Moreover, he claims that no further gestures are possible, and those explain the fact that D is the largest symbol used. But we can imagine many more gestures. Example, arms joined overhead, arms lowered. Plus, we can also imagine positions or gestures of the feet. And all this does not match with the existing Roman finger counting system. So, speaking about pictographical theories, there is not much evidence for it. Also, there is existence of evidence against it in finger counting system. So, we could say that this theory has not much improvement over pre-scan theory. Modern acrophonic theories. There are several modern acrophonic theories that originate Roman numerals from Greek, Etruscan, Phoenician, and Hebrew. Details are quite complicated and full of special linguistic terminology, and to be honest, I don't understand this stuff, so I am not going to try to explain it to you. But I will leave the link in the description, so if you are curious about, you could check the original article, and maybe even explain to me in the comments. But anyway, giving some summary to this section, I would like to cite the article. Acrophonic theories are a Procrustean bet in which Latin or Etruscan numerals can be fitted only by speculation or special pleading. It's noteworthy that none of these theories has won acceptance in detail by any scholar other than its originator. Mommsen's theory has been widely accepted and can be found in many handbooks. Why this theory is called unused letter theory? In short, some letters of the Chalcidian alphabet were not needed for Latin alphabet, so they became the numbers 50, 100, and 1000. The Chalcidian alphabet is a variant of Greek alphabet used in Western Greece and the Greek colonies in Italy. It's believed that Etruscan and Latin alphabets may have evolved from it. For 1, 5, and 10, Mommsen proposed the pre-alphabetic origin. Also, he noticed their resemblance to the Etruscan symbols. The second point might rather indicate that numerals are contemporary with the alphabet, as the Latin alphabet is generally considered to be Etruscan in origin. Also, it's not clear why he dropped the fact that Latin 50 strongly resembles the corresponding Etruscan numeral. Mommsen also has doubts about x, and initially he derived the symbol from the Chalcidian one, which he believed to be unused in Etruscan. He, theta, and phi are also supposed to be unused in Latin, so the symbols became 50, 100, and 1000 for Latin. Mommsen claims that x in the circle was 100 in Etruscan system and later became c by a graphic process. Followers of Mommsen have modified his theory. For example, Menz claims that Latin took the last 3 letters of the Greek alphabet for the decade values and halved them for the half-decade values. And note that this way of explanation gives some incorrect values and gives the wrong forms for 500 and 50. And now you know in how many ways Latin numerals can be explained. But which of these theories is correct, or at least the most probable? The following points are worth considering. First, there are a lot of theories, but it's likely that only one principle for explaining all numerals should be used in one theory. In other words, it's strange to apply 3 or more principles trying to explain only 7 numerals. Second, Etruscan provided an alphabet, and there are some parallels in visual appearance of the Etruscan and Latin numerals, so possibly we could derive the Latin numerals from the Etruscan. Third, symbols for decade values 1, 10, 100 are prior to those of the half-decade values 5, 50, 500. Fourth, letters are only used as numerals either acrophonically or alphabetically. Based on this, one of the most logical conclusions is that Latin all-numeral system is a modified version of the Etruscan tally mark system proposed by Ramus. The symbol for 1 is, as always, a single tally mark. The symbol X for 10 in Etruscan conceived as a second-rank symbol and formed from 2 lines crossing. The Etruscan symbol for 100 is a third-rank symbol and was formed from 3 lines. The Etruscan symbols for 5 and 50 are the lower half of the succeeding decade symbols. The Latins inverted these half-decade symbols to obtain V and trident sign. What of an Etruscan 100 and Latin 100, which is hardly an acrophonic quantum if one theory follows only one principle? There is an evidence that the Etruscan 100 was written also in such rounded form. Here you could see an example, an Etruscan coin. By abbreviation for the convenience of writing, it's quite possible to get C from this symbol. As for the symbol of the 1000, the Etruscans had some changes. And to the crossed lines, the circle was added. Why this happened, it's not clear. It was quite possible to get the 4th digit by adding simply a 4th line, something like this. But anyway, the Etruscan numeral for 1000 looks like this. How could a Latin 1000 be made from this? The Etruscan 1000 could become this sign when written quickly. This sign, written cursively, would lead naturally to the well-attested Latin form of horizontal 8. This horizontal 8 figure could also appear in a compressed form, which leads naturally to the well-attested form of Latin numeral. Although the development of Etruscan 1000 to Latin 1000 is not obvious at first glance, but every step is well attested in Latin. And finally, the symbol for 500. For 1000, the Etruscans had two options. No examples of the 500s in the Etruscan have been found yet. There are only a few inscriptions that presumably contain it. And let me remind you that to symbolize half, the Etruscans used the lower half of the decade value sign. And here is possible evidence of the Etruscans 500. So it is better to consider that the symbol for 500 for Etruscan is not established. However, if we follow the logic of the division of the senior decade value symbol, we can assume that it was a half of 1000. And for Latin numeral, it is a half of Etruscan 1000. The various modern theories can explain the Etruscan Latin numerals only by invoking special plating, and are a little better than the Etruscan ancient theory. In light of our increased knowledge of Etruscan numerals, the Renaissance theory of Ramus can be simplified to explain the Etruscan Latin numerals as a tally mark system, which has undergone some development and abbreviation of its forms. From all theories, only this one is simple, systematic, recognize the influence of the Etruscan on the Romans, and provide parallels to the forms. And often the simplest explanation is the right explanation. Thank you for watching.